The morning sun cast long shadows across the wheat fields of New Terra Colony as Marcus Kane adjusted his scope one final time. The deer stood perfectly still at 800 meters, unaware of the predator watching from the ridgeline. Marcus controlled his breathing, feeling the familiar calm that came before a perfect shot. His finger began to apply pressure to the trigger when a child's laughter echoed across the valley. "Dad! Dad, look what I found!" Marcus lifted his head from the scope and smiled. 7-year-old Emma came running through the tall grass, her auburn hair bouncing with each step. In her small hands, she clutched something that glinted in the sunlight. "What have you got there, Princess?" Marcus asked, setting his rifle aside and opening his arms. Emma crashed into his embrace, her excitement infectious. "It's some kind of crystal. It was just sitting by the old creek, all shiny and pretty. Do you think it's valuable?" Marcus examined the object in his daughter's palm. It was unlike anything he'd seen before. Translucent blue with an inner light that seemed to pulse with its own rhythm. The surface felt warm and almost seemed to hum with energy. "I don't know, sweetheart, but it's certainly beautiful. Why don't we take it back to the house and look it up on the datanet?" As they walked down the hillside toward their modest farmhouse, Marcus reflected on how much his life had changed. 5 years ago, he'd been Staff Sergeant Marcus Kane of the Colonial Marine Corps, one of the most decorated snipers in human space. He'd served in the Outer Rim conflicts, where his legendary accuracy had earned him the nickname Ghost. One shot, one kill. It had been more than a motto. It was a way of life. But then Sarah had gotten pregnant, and everything changed. The idea of bringing a child into the universe while he spent months at a time in combat zones felt wrong. So he'd retired, used his service bonus to buy a small farm on New Terra, and settled into civilian life. When Sarah died in a shuttle accident 3 years ago, Emma became his entire world. The little farmhouse came into view, its solar panels glinting on the roof. Marcus had built most of it himself, his military training making him surprisingly adept at construction and engineering. It was simple but comfortable, with Emma's drawings covering the refrigerator and her toys scattered across the living room floor. "Can we have grilled cheese for lunch?" Emma asked as they climbed the front steps. "Course we can, but first let's see what we can find out about your crystal." Marcus powered up the old data terminal while Emma carefully placed her find on the kitchen table. The crystal's glow seemed brighter indoors, casting strange patterns on the walls. As Marcus began searching the colonial database, he felt an odd unease. The crystal didn't match anything in the geological surveys of New Terra. "Dad, it's getting brighter," Emma said, her voice filled with wonder rather than fear. Marcus turned to see the crystal pulsing faster now, its light shifting from blue to a brilliant white. Before he could react, the light exploded outward, filling the room with blinding radiance. When Marcus's vision cleared, the farmhouse was gone. He and Emma stood in what appeared to be a vast metallic chamber, surrounded by beings that defied description. They were roughly humanoid but taller, with elongated limbs and skin that seemed to shift between silver and black. Their faces were angular, with large dark eyes that showed no emotion. Emma pressed close against Marcus's side, whimpering softly. His paternal instincts kicked in immediately, even as his military training assessed the situation. No visible weapons, but that meant nothing. The technology to transport them instantly across space suggested capabilities far beyond human understanding. "Do not be alarmed," one of the beings spoke, its voice echoing strangely in Marcus's mind rather than his ears. "You have been selected for participation in the great work." "Selected for what? Who are you? Take us back home. Now!" Marcus's voice carried the authority of someone accustomed to being obeyed. The being's head tilted slightly, a gesture that might have been amusement. "I am Overseer Kethvar of the Dominion. Your species has come to our attention. We require specimens for study and integration into our empire." Specimens? Marcus felt rage building in his chest, but he kept his voice steady for Emma's sake. We're not specimens. We're people. We have rights. Rights are a concept for civilized species. Your kind has not yet achieved true sentience. You will adapt to serve the Dominion, or you will be disposed of. The casual dismissal of humanity's worth hit Marcus like a physical blow. He'd heard similar attitudes from some of the more arrogant alien species humanity had encountered, but never backed by this level of technological superiority. The adult will be processed for labor assignment, Kethvar continued. The young one shows promising neural plasticity. She will be inducted into our youth development program. No. The word came out flat and deadly. You're not taking my daughter anywhere. Several more Dominion soldiers entered the chamber, their movements fluid and coordinated. Marcus noted their positioning, their equipment, their apparent blind spots, habits from a lifetime of tactical thinking. Daddy? Emma's voice was small and scared. It's okay, Princess. Everything's going to be okay. Kethvar made a gesture, and one of the soldiers moved toward Emma. Marcus's hand shot out, grabbing the alien's wrist with crushing force. The being's surprised, telepathic cry echoed in the chamber as Marcus twisted, using leverage and momentum to slam the soldier into the nearest wall. The response was immediate. Energy weapons materialized in the hands of the remaining soldiers, all trained on Marcus. But they hesitated. Clearly, they wanted both humans alive. Fascinating, Kethvar observed. The adult shows more aggressive capability than our intelligence suggested. Perhaps humans have been underestimated. Daddy, I'm scared, Emma whispered. Marcus knelt down to her level, ignoring the weapons pointed at him. Listen to me, Emma. Remember what I taught you about being brave? She nodded, tears in her eyes. Sometimes brave means staying quiet and watching. Sometimes it means running when you get the chance. And sometimes it means fighting. But you always remember that I love you more than anything in the universe, okay? I love you too, Daddy. Kethvar's patience seemed to wear thin. Enough sentiment. Separate them. The soldiers moved forward in perfect coordination. Marcus managed to disable two more before a neural disruptor struck him in the back. As consciousness faded, he heard Emma screaming his name. When Marcus awoke, he was in a different chamber, smaller and clearly designed as a cell. The walls were seamless metal, and the only light came from strips embedded in the ceiling. His body ached from the neural disruptor, but his mind was already working, cataloging every detail of his prison. Emma, he called out but received no answer. A section of the wall shimmered and became transparent. Beyond it, he could see a vast space filled with hundreds of similar cells. In some, he glimpsed other beings, not all human, but all clearly prisoners. Your offspring is being prepared for her new purpose. Kethvar's voice filled the cell. Do not concern yourself with her fate. Focus on your own adaptation to servitude. Where is she? That information is not relevant to your function. You will be processed, conditioned, and assigned to a labor detail. Resistance will result in neural reconstruction. Compliance will be rewarded with continued existence. Marcus stood slowly, every movement deliberate. You made a mistake. Explain. You think humans are just another primitive species to be conquered and enslaved. You're wrong. We've been fighting wars since we climbed down from the trees. We've turned warfare into an art form. And you just gave us a reason to show you exactly what we're capable of. Kethvar's image appeared on the transparent wall, his alien features unreadable. Empty threats from a caged primitive. Your species lacks the technology to threaten the Dominion. We don't need superior technology. We have something better. And what is that? Marcus smiled, and something in that expression seemed to give even the alien overseer pause. We have nothing left to lose, and you took my daughter. The wall returned to opacity. leaving Marcus alone with his thoughts. He began to examine every inch of his cell, his mind already working on the problem. The Dominion had made their first mistake when they underestimated humanity. Their second mistake was taking Emma. He thought about his years in the Marine Corps, the impossible missions, the targets that couldn't be reached, the enemies that couldn't be defeated. The Corps had a saying, "The difficult we do immediately, the impossible takes a little longer." Marcus Kane had been retired for 5 years, but Staff Sergeant Kane had never really gone away. He'd simply been sleeping, waiting for a reason to wake up. Now he had the best reason imaginable. Somewhere in this facility, his little girl was scared and alone, probably wondering if her daddy would come for her. The Dominion expected him to be broken by their show of power, to accept his fate as a slave. They were about to learn why human snipers were called ghosts. Marcus settled into the corner of his cell and began to plan. He would need to learn the facility's layout, the guards' routines, the location of weapons and equipment. He would need to find Emma and map an escape route. Most importantly, he would need to survive long enough to show these aliens that taking a human child was the last mistake they would ever make. The hunt was about to begin. Marcus spent 3 days learning the rhythm of the prison facility. The Dominion guards followed predictable patterns, their advanced technology making them overconfident. They believed their neural disruptors and energy barriers made rebellion impossible. They hadn't counted on a human who had spent 15 years studying enemy patterns and finding weaknesses where none seemed to exist. The feeding schedule was regular, synthetic nutrient blocks delivered through a slot that opened for exactly 30 seconds. The guard rotations changed every 8 hours, with a brief 5-minute gap during shift changes. Most importantly, the neural dampening field that kept prisoners docile had a fluctuation every 12 hours when the generators reset. During that brief window, Marcus's military training came flooding back. On the 4th morning, he put his plan into action. When the feeding slot opened, Marcus was ready. Years of farming had kept him strong, and his enhanced reflexes from sniper training still responded perfectly. As the mechanical arm extended to deliver his meal, Marcus grabbed it and twisted with precise force. The arm snapped with a satisfying crunch. Sparks flew from the damaged mechanism, and alarms began blaring throughout the facility. Within seconds, 2 Dominion guards appeared outside his cell, their dark eyes showing what might have been concern. "Step away from the feeding mechanism," one commanded telepathically. Marcus held up his hands in apparent surrender. "Sorry about that. Accident. These old human reflexes, you know." The guards exchanged glances, their alien communication too rapid and complex for Marcus to follow. One of them began manipulating controls to open the cell door, while the other raised an energy weapon. Perfect. The moment the barrier shimmered down, Marcus moved. His body remembered every lesson from Marine combat training, every drill practiced until it became instinct. He rolled left as the energy blast seared the air where he'd been standing, came up behind the first guard, and applied a chokehold that worked surprisingly well on Dominion anatomy. The second guard tried to adjust his aim, but Marcus was already moving, using his captive as a shield. The alien's weapon discharged into its companion, and both guards collapsed. Marcus quickly searched the bodies, finding what looked like key cards and communication devices. The weapons were biometrically locked, but the access cards might prove useful. He also noticed that the alien's armor, while advanced, had weak points at the joints, information that might save his life later. The corridor beyond his cell stretched in both directions, lined with identical prison units. Some contained other humans, their faces pressed against the transparent walls, hope flickering in their eyes for the first time since their capture. Marcus wanted to free them all, but he had one priority that trumped everything else: Emma. He moved through the facility like the ghost he'd once been, staying in shadows, avoiding patrol routes, using every skill he'd learned in 15 years of military service. The Dominion architecture was efficient, but predictable. Straight lines, right angles, everything designed for function rather than defense against infiltration. The communication device he'd taken began chattering with alien voices. Marcus couldn't understand the language, but the tone suggested growing alarm. His escape had been discovered and security protocols were activating throughout the facility. Good. Scared enemies made mistakes. Marcus found a maintenance shaft and crawled through the facility's infrastructure, his farmer's practical knowledge helping him understand the basic layout. Water pipes, power conduits, air circulation. Every space station or ship followed certain engineering principles, regardless of the species that built it. After 20 minutes of careful movement, he emerged in what appeared to be a surveillance center. Dozens of screens showed various parts of the facility, including sections Marcus hadn't seen before. His breath caught in his throat when one screen showed a group of human children, Emma among them, being led through a sterile white corridor by Dominion technicians. She looked so small and frightened, but she was walking on her own, apparently unharmed. Relief flooded through Marcus, followed immediately by renewed determination. The surveillance center was unguarded, another example of Dominion overconfidence. Marcus began studying the screens, memorizing the facility layout, and identifying potential routes to reach the children's section. He also noticed something interesting. The Dominion seemed to have prisoners from multiple species, not just humans. This wasn't a simple raid on Earth colonies. It was a systematic harvesting operation across the galaxy. One screen showed a hangar bay filled with small fighter craft. Another revealed what looked like communication arrays. A third displayed rows of stasis pods containing unconscious beings of various species. The scope of the Dominion's operation was staggering, but it also suggested something Marcus could exploit. They were spread thin, managing operations across multiple systems. A new sound echoed through the facility, a general alarm different from the prison break alert. Marcus listened carefully and realized it was a recall signal. The Dominion was pulling back their forces, consolidating them for better security. That gave him an opportunity. Marcus made his way toward the children's section, using maintenance passages and following routes that avoided the main corridors where guards were now moving in organized patterns. His military experience told him they were implementing a lockdown protocol, sealing sections of the facility to prevent further escapes. He reached an observation point overlooking the area where he'd seen Emma. Through a ventilation grate, he could see a large chamber filled with human children of various ages. They were being organized into groups by Dominion technicians who seemed to be conducting some kind of evaluation process. Emma stood with 5 other children her age, her chin raised in a display of defiance that made Marcus's heart swell with pride. Even scared and alone, she was showing the same courage that had always amazed him. One of the technicians approached Emma's group, carrying what looked like a neural interface device. Marcus realized with horror that they were preparing to begin whatever conditioning process the Dominion used to transform free beings into compliant slaves. Not his daughter. Not while he drew breath. Marcus studied the chamber's layout, counting guards, noting weapon positions, identifying cover points and escape routes. There were 8 Dominion personnel in the room, plus automated defense systems that would activate if an alarm was raised. The children were positioned in the center of the chamber, making any direct assault extremely dangerous. But Marcus hadn't become the Marine Corps' most decorated sniper by taking only safe shots. He backtracked through the maintenance system until he found what he was looking for: the facility's main power distribution center. The Dominion's technology was advanced, but it still required energy. Cut the power at the right moment, and their sophisticated systems would fail. Marcus began rewiring the power grid, his practical knowledge from maintaining farm equipment surprisingly applicable to alien technology. Basic principles of electrical engineering seemed to be universal. He rigged a controlled overload that would shut down power to the children's section while maintaining life support, a surgical strike rather than a devastating blow. While he worked, Marcus heard the facility's communication system crackling with activity. The Dominion was coordinating their response to his escape, but their voices carried an undertone he'd learned to recognize in enemy communications: uncertainty. They didn't understand what they were dealing with. To them, he was just another primitive who'd gotten lucky. They expected him to make random, desperate attacks that their superior technology could easily counter. Instead, they were facing a predator who had studied warfare as both art and science, who understood that the greatest victories came not from superior firepower, but from superior thinking. Marcus finished his modifications to the power grid and made his way back toward the children's section. Along the way, he liberated several pieces of equipment from unguarded stations: a plasma cutter, some kind of emergency beacon, and what appeared to be a portable force field generator. As he moved through the facility, Marcus noticed something else. The Dominion's response to his escape was revealing significant information about their operations. Guard positions, communication protocols, emergency procedures. Every action they took gave him more intelligence to work with. The technician was approaching Emma with the neural interface when Marcus triggered his power overload. The lights went out instantly, plunging the children's section into darkness. Emergency lighting kicked in a few seconds later, but those crucial moments of confusion were all Marcus needed. He dropped through a ceiling panel into the chamber, landing behind the nearest guard. The plasma cutter made short work of the alien's armor, and Marcus appropriated its weapon before the others could react. Unlike the biometrically locked weapons he'd encountered earlier, this one seemed to respond to whoever held it. "Emma!" he called out in the dim emergency lighting. "Daddy!" Her voice came from the center of the group of children, filled with joy and relief. The remaining Dominion personnel were trying to coordinate their response, but the darkness and Marcus's mobility made him nearly impossible to target. He moved like a shadow among the chamber's equipment, taking carefully aimed shots that disabled rather than killed. He needed information, and dead aliens couldn't provide it. Within minutes, the chamber was secure. The children huddled together, looking up at Marcus with a mixture of fear and hope. Emma broke away from the group and ran to him, throwing her arms around his waist. "I knew you'd come," she said, her voice muffled against his chest. "I told the others you'd come for us." "Of course I came, Princess. Nothing in the universe could keep me away." Marcus held her tight for a moment, then gently pushed her back. "But we're not safe yet. We need to get all of you out of here." One of the other children, a boy who looked about 10, stepped forward. "Sir, are you really going to get us all home?" Marcus looked at the faces around him. Scared children who'd been torn from their families, some probably from different worlds entirely. The weight of responsibility settled on his shoulders, but he'd carried heavier burdens before. "Yes," he said simply. "All of you. I promise." As if summoned by his words, the facility's main communication system activated, and Kethvar's voice filled the chamber. "Attention, escaped prisoner. You have demonstrated impressive capabilities for a primitive, but your situation remains hopeless. Surrender now, and the children will not be harmed. Continue your resistance, and we will be forced to implement more aggressive containment measures." Marcus found one of the communication panels and activated it. "Overseer Kethvar, this is Marcus Kane. I have a counter-proposal." "Speak." "Release all human prisoners and return us to our worlds. Do this, and I'll consider not turning this facility into your tomb." The pause that followed was longer than Marcus expected. When Kethvar finally responded, his mental voice carried what sounded almost like amusement. "You continue to overestimate your capabilities. You are one being against an entire facility. Your capture is inevitable." "Maybe," Marcus agreed. But you're about to learn something about humans that your intelligence reports missed. We don't measure success by survival. We measure it by whether we accomplish our mission. My mission is to get these children home. Everything else is secondary. Another pause. Explain. Marcus smiled grimly. You wanted to study humans. Congratulations. You're about to get a master class in human warfare. I hope you're taking notes. He cut the communication link and turned to the children. The emergency power he'd left intact was already restoring some of the chamber's systems, but they had a limited window before full security protocols came back online. Listen up, everyone. We're going to play a game. It's called Follow the Ghost. The rules are simple. Stay quiet, do exactly what I say, and trust me to get you home. Can you do that? Emma nodded immediately, and the other children followed her lead. They might be scared, but they were also young enough to believe that adults could work miracles. Marcus just hoped they were right. Marcus led the group of 12 children through the facility's maintenance corridors, Emma's small hand firmly gripping his. The other children followed in perfect silence, their trust in him both humbling and terrifying. Every decision he made in the next few hours would determine whether these kids saw their families again. The facility's layout was becoming clearer as they moved. The Dominion had designed it like a massive wheel, with the command center at the hub and different operational sections radiating outward. The children's processing area was in one spoke, the adult prisoner section in another, and the hangar bay was located at the facility's outer rim. Getting to the hangar meant crossing the central hub, where security would be strongest. But Marcus had noticed something during his reconnaissance that might give them an advantage. The Dominion's reliance on their technology created predictable blind spots. They reached a junction where 3 maintenance shafts met. Marcus held up his hand, signaling the children to stop, and listened carefully. The facility's communication systems buzzed with activity as search teams coordinated their efforts. They were being systematic, checking every section, but they were also assuming he would try to hide rather than move toward the most heavily defended area. Emma, he whispered, remember the emergency beacon I showed you on the farm? The one for calling help if something happened to me? She nodded. Marcus pulled out the device he'd appropriated from the Dominion station. This works the same way, but it sends a message to other humans in space. I'm going to activate it now, but that means the bad aliens will know where we are. We'll have to move fast after this, understand? Yes, Daddy. He triggered the beacon, setting it to broadcast on all human communication frequencies with a simple message. Human prisoners require immediate assistance. Coordinates attached. This is Staff Sergeant Marcus Kane, Colonial Marines. Authentication code follows. Within seconds, the facility's alarms changed pitch. The Dominion had detected the transmission and were triangulating its source, but Marcus was counting on something else. Any human military unit receiving that message would recognize his name and authentication code. Ghost Company's reputation extended throughout human space. Okay, everyone, time to run. They moved through the maintenance system with practiced precision, the children following Marcus's lead as he navigated toward the central hub. Behind them, he could hear Dominion forces converging on their previous location. The hub was a vast, spherical chamber at the facility's heart, filled with control stations and holographic displays showing the status of their galactic operations. Marcus could see star charts marking dozens of systems, with indicators showing ongoing raids and prisoner transports. The scope of the Dominion's empire was staggering. More importantly, the chamber was lightly defended. Most of the guards had been pulled away to search for the escaped prisoners. Only a handful of technicians remained at their stations, monitoring the facility's systems. Marcus studied the room from a ventilation grate, counting personnel and identifying the best route across. The children would be exposed for at least 30 seconds crossing the chamber. It was a risk, but staying in the maintenance shafts would mean certain capture as the search teams closed in. Listen carefully, he whispered to the group. We're going to cross that big room down there. Stay low, move fast, and don't stop for anything. Emma, you lead the others. Head for the tunnel on the far side. If something happens to me, keep going to the hangar. Look for the human ships. Daddy, no, Emma protested. We stay together. Sometimes the best way to stay together is to split up temporarily, Marcus said gently. I need you to be brave and take care of the other kids. Can you do that for me? She nodded reluctantly, understanding the weight of responsibility he was placing on her young shoulders. Marcus dropped through the grate and moved toward the nearest control station. The Dominion technician looked up in surprise just as Marcus's hand found the neural disruptor controls. One quick adjustment to the setting, and the alien slumped unconscious rather than dying. The other technicians reacted with typical Dominion efficiency, reaching for alarm controls and communication devices. But Marcus was already moving, using the chamber's equipment as cover while he systematically disabled them. His Marine training emphasized non-lethal solutions when possible. Dead enemies couldn't provide intelligence or serve as bargaining chips. Now, he called softly. The children dropped through the grate and ran across the chamber in a tight group, Emma leading them exactly as Marcus had instructed. They reached the far tunnel just as reinforcements began arriving in the hub. Marcus provided covering fire, using the appropriated Dominion weapon to keep the guards pinned down while the children escaped. The energy blasts scorched the walls around him, but his sniper training served him well. He knew how to use cover and movement to avoid return fire. A new sound echoed through the facility, the deep thrumming of ship engines. Marcus allowed himself a moment of hope. Either human forces were responding to his beacon, or the Dominion was bringing in additional ships. Either way, it meant the situation was escalating. He reached the tunnel just as Kethvar's voice filled the facility. Staff Sergeant Kane, impressive credentials. We have accessed your military records. Your reputation precedes you. Marcus found a communication panel and activated it. Then you know what you're dealing with. Indeed. Which is why I am prepared to offer terms. Surrender yourself, and the children will be returned to human space unharmed. Continue your resistance, and they will be processed according to Dominion protocols. Counter-offer, Marcus replied, checking his weapon's charge. You release all human prisoners, provide transportation to our nearest colonies, and I don't teach your entire empire why humans are called the apex predators of known space. Kethvar's mental laughter was cold and alien. You speak with considerable confidence for someone trapped in our facility. Who says I'm trapped? The silence that followed suggested Marcus had given the overseer something to think about. He used the pause to catch up with the children who had reached another junction in the maintenance system. Is help really coming? Asked the 10-year-old boy who'd spoken earlier. Help is always coming, Marcus replied, checking the passage ahead. The question is whether it gets here before we handle things ourselves. They were close to the hangar now. Marcus could hear the sounds of ship movement and Dominion personnel coordinating launch procedures. Either they were evacuating or bringing in reinforcements. Given their technological superiority, probably the latter. The final maintenance shaft led to an observation point overlooking the hangar bay. Marcus's breath caught when he saw what waited below. Dozens of sleek Dominion fighters were arranged in precise rows, but more importantly, he could see several captured human ships near the far bulkhead. The vessels were intact, apparently being studied rather than destroyed. Among them was a familiar silhouette that made Marcus's heart race, a Colonial Marine Corps assault transport, its hull bearing the distinctive markings of Ghost Company. Well, I'll be damned, Marcus whispered. Emma tugged on his sleeve. What is it, Daddy? That ship down there belongs to some old friends of mine, and if I know Ghost Company, they don't leave their people behind. As if summoned by his words, explosions began erupting along the facility's outer hull. The massive structure shuddered under the impact of what could only be military-grade weaponry. Emergency lighting bathed the hangar in red as automated systems responded to the attack. The cavalry had arrived. Marcus led the children down into the hangar using maintenance ladders and service catwalks. The Dominion personnel were in chaos, trying to coordinate their response to the external assault while securing their prisoner assets. In the confusion, a small group moving carefully through the shadows went unnoticed. They reached the Ghost Company transport just as its boarding ramp began lowering. Marcus felt a surge of emotion as familiar figures in Marine combat armor emerged, their weapons sweeping the area with professional precision. "Ghost 6, this is Ghost Actual," Marcus called out, using his old unit designation. "I've got civilians requiring immediate extraction." The lead Marine's helmet turned toward him, and Marcus recognized the voice of Major Sarah Chen, his old commanding officer. "Well, if it isn't the farm boy," she said with obvious relief. "We got your beacon. Took us a while to track down this mobile facility." "Mobile?" Marcus looked around with new understanding. The facility wasn't a station. It was a massive ship, explaining how the Dominion could coordinate raids across multiple systems. "Biggest ship we've ever seen," Chen confirmed. "Our entire task force is out there keeping their attention while we extract prisoners. We've got maybe 10 minutes before they overwhelm our defenses." Marcus pushed Emma toward the transport. "Get the kids aboard. I'll cover the boarding." "Negative, Ghost 6. You're coming with us. That's an order." "I can't leave the other prisoners." "Already handled. We've got 3 extraction teams hitting different sections simultaneously. Standard Ghost Company operation. Nobody gets left behind." The hangar erupted in weapons fire as Dominion forces finally located them. Marcus and the Marines formed a defensive perimeter around the boarding ramp while the children scrambled into the transport. Emma was the last to board, looking back at her father with worry. "Go, Princess! I'll be right behind you." The transport's weapons systems came online, adding their firepower to the defensive effort. Marcus recognized the tactical efficiency of a Ghost Company extraction. Every Marine knew their role, every movement was coordinated, every shot counted. "Time to go," Chen called out. "The facility's powering weapons that could crack our ships like eggs." They fell back toward the transport in perfect order, Marcus and the Marines providing alternating cover as they boarded. As the ramp began closing, Marcus caught a glimpse of Kethvar across the hangar, the alien overseer watching their escape with what looked like a mixture of rage and grudging respect. The transport lifted off just as massive energy beams began lancing through space around the facility. Through the viewports, Marcus could see the Ghost Company task force, 3 destroyers, and a heavy cruiser, all pouring fire into the Dominion ship's defenses. "Daddy!" Emma launched herself into his arms as the transport shook under acceleration. "Are we really going home?" "We're going home," Marcus confirmed, holding her tight. Around them, the other rescued children were being tended to by Marine medics, their faces showing the first real hope they'd felt since their capture. Major Chen sat down beside Marcus as the transport cleared the battle zone. "Hell of a thing you did in there. Intelligence reports we're receiving suggest you took down half their security single-handed." "I had motivation." "That you did." Chen looked at Emma, who had fallen asleep against her father's chest. "The Dominion made a serious error in judgment. They underestimated us. More than that. They assumed we were just another species to be harvested. They didn't realize that humans bond differently, that we'll tear apart the universe for our children." Chen smiled grimly. "Word of this is going to spread throughout their empire. They wanted to study human capabilities. Now they've got a demonstration they'll never forget." Through the viewport, Marcus could see the massive Dominion ship falling behind, its hull scarred by the task force's assault. They hadn't destroyed it. That would have been impossible with their current firepower, but they'd sent a message that would resonate throughout galactic space. Humanity was not prey. "What happens now?" Marcus asked. "Now? Now we go home and prepare for the war that's coming, because after this, the Dominion isn't going to underestimate us again. They're going to come at us with everything they've got." Marcus looked down at Emma, sleeping peacefully despite the chaos of their escape. For 5 years, he'd thought his fighting days were over. He'd been wrong. The Dominion had made one fatal mistake. They'd taken his daughter and shown him what they were capable of. Now he knew what humanity was facing, and he had a new mission. "Then we'd better be ready for them," Marcus said quietly. In the depths of space, the Ghost Company task force jumped to hyperspace, carrying its rescued prisoners toward home. Behind them, the Dominion facility continued its own journey through the void, but its crew would never again underestimate the species they'd thought to enslave. They'd learned the hard way that humans were not just another primitive race to be harvested. They were the species that turned love into warfare, and warfare into art. The Galactic Empire had made their fatal mistake. Now they would live with the consequences. Emma stirred in her sleep, and Marcus smoothed her hair gently. "It's okay, Princess. Daddy's here, and Daddy's not going anywhere." The war was coming, but that was a problem for tomorrow. Today, his little girl was safe in his arms, and that was all that mattered. After all, he was just a farmer who used to be a sniper, and he'd just reminded the galaxy why humans were called ghosts.